Hello, welcome to Unical Academy's CISSP Simple Training Series. Now we are starting lesson 6. Ideally, this should have been lesson 1, connecting the dots and getting the bigger picture of CISSP, how to clearly have a mind map of such a vast syllabus of CISSP that we are going to cover. So first, let us start with the CISSP mind map. This is very important. This particular slide clearly get the big picture. What is the mindset of ISC square while deciding this syllabus and how each domain is organized by the steering committee at ISC square when they decided the syllabus. In this session, we will be going in detail on each domain, how these are actually connected, what should be your focus of learning. Let us get an overview, just an overview in this particular aspect. So as far as domain 1 is concerned, please understand this sets the tone and the momentum. In fact, this particular domain has the maximum percentage. The 15% of the questions come from this domain. What are the ethics involved? What are the principles, concepts, values behind the entire concept of security or information security as far as CISSP concerned, around confidentiality, integrity, and availability? So, what rules you need to follow? What are the legal and compliance implications? As an organization, what sort of policies and guidelines we need to follow? Apart from CIA, or in fact the most important safety across the world is personnel safety. How do you take care of the people? What sort of potential risks possible and how we take it? That is covered in the first domain, the 15%. Possibly 19 to 26 questions you get from this domain. Now let us jump to the second one. So once the policies are clear, once we are clear what we need to do, the second aspect is protect your assets. How do you classify assets, data, information? What are the data states, different data states? Data in rest, in use, during transition. Who is the data administrator? Who is data custodian? Who is the data owner? How do you decide? And how do you protect the data? Data loss prevention, how you will be doing, either at the endpoint level or at a network level, how we handle. This is the second one that has 10% weightage, covering 13 to 18 questions. From here onwards, the third, fourth, fifth, and the security operations, these are actually cover 13%, each 13%, and security assessment is covering roughly 12% of the overall syllabus questions, and this talks about 11%. That's the overall 100% of the weightage spread across your 125 questions to 175 questions. That's what we need to plan. So coming to security, let me erase to bring the neatness. First, the rules, regulations are covered here simply, and understand what are you securing is covered here, and basic architecture. Okay, I want to safeguard this, but where is my architectural principles, potential security models, the solutions in spite of all these, despite all this, what could be the possible attacks, and how do you safeguard the entire site and facility? That's actually discussed in third. In fourth, after the design, the communication happens only through network security channels, either wired or wireless. So for that, what sort of architecture you are building, what sort of components, and the different communication channels are covered in domain 4. Then domain 5 talks about who are the people accessing and what is their authentication and what is their authorization is covered here. Then comes the number 6, what sort of testing and security mechanism we can actually put across. How do you identify an incident? How do you recover? How do you log? How do you minimize? Is covered in security 7. So only 8 can be looked separately. Let me come back to that and why I'm drawing this boundary and the separation. This deals with the software testing or software security. Again, in nutshell, please remember, I'm spending some time, a substantial time on this, considering the criticality. Do you have the policies, rules, and regulations before taking care of your security? What are you securing? Do you have the basic design and architecture in place before developing something or while developing an application or a package or a system or the entire IT infra? That is what talks in the security number 3. Whatever is the design, it needs to be communicated. Are you safeguarding your network? Eventually the hacking is done or the vulnerability is created by the people. So are you sure who is accessing, why is dealt in domain 5. All these are the initial. So here onwards, this is during the design. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 can be considered the basic design concepts, principles. This is during execution. Are you testing regularly? Are you auditing periodically? Are you bridging any potential gaps? Are you able to monitor an unknown threat by logging and monitoring everything? Are you really taking enough precautions if something goes wrong? Recovery, BCP, DR. That is dealt here. The last is why I put separately. This is every company or entire information systems dealt with software that is either developed or acquired. If that is the case, what is the mechanism in place? That's what is dealt across all this. This is the mind map. Better you take a screenshot of this, better take a printout, use this near your desk as a wall poster, get the clear landscape of this, then that is much easy for you to score and pass CISSP. Okay, since we already covered the 8 domains, now let us understand the mindset of CISSP when they really built the syllabus around 8 domains. The maximum questions, the minimum questions what you get are 125 and the maximum questions that you get 175. What does it mean? CISSP assesses a candidate from 0 to 1000 scale. Anything 0 to 699, what CISSP calls is below proficiency. 700 and above, it calls above proficiency. They also use another term near proficiency. This classification requires an elaboration when they said near proficiency. CISSP expects the candidate to score 70% in each domain and overall also 70%. However, in critical areas such as these, if proficiency is way beyond 70%, somewhere closer to 80 to 90%, and in case in certain domains it is near proficient, what it means is maybe 65% or maybe 67%. They have not disclosed this criteria, but if in one or two domains, if all other domains are real scored well above, and in one or two domains if it's slightly near proficiency but which is below 70%, there is a possibility of that candidate passing the CISSP. So that is the classification of below proficiency, near proficiency, and above proficiency. What do you mean by minimum 125, maximum 175? So by the time a candidate clears 125 marks and computer adapted test concludes that this individual will be guaranteed to be above proficient, then the exam ends after 125 questions. And if it concludes that the person can no way cross or come closer to near proficiency and definitely it would be below proficient, even then the exam ends. In other words, it is a normal distribution. Somebody is way below, then you are failing. Somebody is guaranteed above, then also this exam ends after 125 questions. To validate whether somebody can go below or above, only for them the remaining questions of 125 to 175 come. That is the algorithm built in within CISSP adaptive test. Okay, now let us dissect and bisect each domain. What do you mean by security and risk management? When we say these are the basic principles, so that are actually covered. So if you see one point I missed here. So the 8 domains are covered with 62 objectives. So when you're talking about security and risk management, in the first domain we are talking about 13 objectives. That leads to 15% of the weightage in the exam. So domain 1 deals with at high level. Please understand this is a mind map, get a high level. When you are planning for security of an organization of information system, then first you need to have ethics. For that, in fact, we need to sign CISSP or ISS square ethics to really get certified. First, once you enter to the hall, you are supposed to sign the ethics page. Only then you are allowed to appear for exam. Have principles, security principles, and the concepts. What are you trying to protect? What is your business interest? What could be the potential individually personally identifiable information or protected health information? What could be your proprietary IP that you want to safeguard? Based on that, identify the legal and compliance requirements. Once you are clear about your principles, concepts, why are you here for the security, what are your legal and compliance requirements for the organization that is doing business in a specific segment, for that frame your policies and guidelines accordingly, training the people. In spite of that, despite the trainings, policies, requirements, there could be a risk or set of risks that need to be modeled and should be protected. That's it. This is a summary of domain 1. When we go back while recollecting this particular mind map, understand that's it. This is what the domain 1. Now let's go to domain 2. Since the policies are already laid down, now let us understand what are we expected to protect as certified CISSP. At the end of the day, assets need to be classified, assessed and classified. So assets, anything that is useful for an organization, that is providing value to an organization, and the information that an organization is dealing, maybe the customer data, vendor data, proprietary information, some research paper, anything that is dealt by various people. They have different roles, maybe a user, maybe a system administrator, maybe network administrator, data processor, CEO, CIO, CTO, whom you call data owner. So that need to be clear. Ultimately, protect your data, safeguard your data. There is a potential threat, there could be potential vulnerability that needs to be assessed. So what is the data retention policy? How are we collecting the data? How do we maintain the data? What is different data states, data at rest, data in transition, data in use? All those are dealt in this asset security that covers 6 objectives defined by ISC square. The third one, here onwards, the depth of the subjects, the concept of these subjects, and the practicality, the practical knowledge in that particular subject is really assessed by computer adaptive test. Please be clear. Okay, now security architecture and engineering. When the CISSP or ISC square decided the curriculum, what was in their mind? Yeah, we are trying to understand, at least in this session, in this lesson, their mindset while deciding the curriculum as ISC square, our mind map to pass the exam by understanding their mindset. That's the only focus. We are not talking about any subject here. Ultimately, mindset to mind map mapping so that we can comfortably pass the exam. That is the focus. What it covers, what are the expectations at high level from the objectives perspective. If you are actually talking, this talks about overall 9 objectives, majorly dealing with these. First, be clear on the security design principles. The threat modeling, what do you mean by zero trust, what do you mean by least privileges, defense in depth, layered defense, firewall, after that something else, after that something else, XYZ, how do you put across access control, focusing on privacy by design. What do you mean by privacy by design? What do you mean by trust but verify? What do you mean by shared responsibility? And then different security models to protect CIA that you will be covering in depth. Biba model, star model, Bell LaPadula model, those are actually covered here. After that, how an architecture should be designed to ensure the safety. What do you mean by client-based system, server-based system, database systems, industrial control systems such as IoTs and others should be understood thoroughly here. Then in the next, after understanding the models, principles and architecture, basics of what do you mean by cryptography, what do you mean by, what are the various algorithms available within the cryptographic system, symmetric algorithms, asymmetric algorithms, elliptical curve, quantum, all those brief overview of the encryptions and cryptography. Despite having that, what sort of possible attacks, brute force, ciphertext, known plain text, All those attacks are actually covered. So cryptographic system attacked with cryptanalytics. That's what will be covered. After that, the last is the site and facility design. So this actually enables you the number one, the first domain was talking about the concepts, the rules and regulations. Two, talking about what you want to protect the assets. Three, how do you design to protect the assets. The fourth one talks about after designing how the network actually plays a role in this particular integrated information systems. What do you mean by network architecture? What are the components involved in a network design? So very simple. This actually talks about only three principles, but the depth that is required is huge. Please understand. As we referred in slide number 3, domain 4 covers 13% of the syllabus. So the questions may be from minimum 16 questions to 23 questions based on the criteria that we already concluded, whether do you get 125 questions or 175 questions. Okay, what is covered? In network architecture, the simple OSI layers, the 7 layers of open system architecture, and what you mean by internet protocol, what is IPv4 versus IPv6, what are the various secure protocols that we need to be aware, the fiber channel overview, and then router, switch, VPN, tunneling, various network communications, and then talks about the last one about the different communication channels with wired or wireless that you should be well versed while preparing for CISSP at high level. Please understand, don't get overwhelmed with this syllabus or the terms. CSS's simple requirement is the syllabus is mile wide, only 1 foot depth. So at high level, focus to be a jack of all, need not, I can't say the master of none, but at least partially be aware about everything. That's it. You will be clearing your CISSP in first attempt with flying colors. Okay, once the network is in place for communication, then we need to be clear who are the individuals accessing, how do I identify them, how should the authentication happen, after authentication what sort of authorizations, access privileges a security team should be providing to an individual. So role based access here at high level, segregation of duties, identity management, bringing the accountability, session validation, session termination, role based access control, mandatory access control, so attribute based access control, all those are actually covered in domain 5. So now let us briefly touch domain 6. Here comes, am I doing things right? Am I doing right things? Am I doing things right? Am I doing right things as far as security is concerned? Periodic audit, surprise audit, scheduled audits, assessing before you actually design, and testing after it is really built, regularly auditing, upgrading the security controls based on the criteria that regularly get updated either during the reviews or based on the market conditions or the situations, is covered in domain 6. Domain 7, whatever you do, there is a vulnerability. Whatever you do, there is potential risk. Whatever you do, something may go wrong. You need to recover if something goes wrong. That's the concept. Be clear on how you can investigate, or how internal investigation or the law enforcement investigation, what needs to be logged, so that It can be monitored if situation compels, and how a security incident happens, how it should be controlled, what are the different mechanisms that can actually come into picture is covered. So this relatively security operations as a domain is vast area, covers several aspects, covering 15 defined objectives, focusing with, priority, with attentiveness is essential as far as security operations concerned. Very easy to score, but relatively confusing if the fundamentals or the concepts are not thoroughly understood. Because the coverage starting from what should be done, or in other words, what should I say? Yeah, how do you collect the evidence? How do you report? How do you preserve evidence? Ingress monitoring, egress monitoring, media management, detection, response, mitigation, and reporting in case if a threat is already observed. What sort of mechanisms can be in place? Disaster recovery, business continuity planning, so regular backups while somebody is traveling, particularly key personnel traveling, C-level leadership, what sort of precautions an organization has to take. So starting from simple physical gate security to extreme complex network security, this domain covers all the possible operations of the information security system for which you are getting certified as a professional. That is the focus of domain 7. Now what I feel sort of not directly connected domain with all 7 domains is the software development security. This is ultimately, when you say information system, when you say computer, that deals only with software. That is the critical or important reason why this domain 8 is brought in. Here, most of the security professionals who may not be coming from the software development background may get lost or may get overwhelmed or get confused, because this talks about what is SDLC, starting from the requirements to final code deployment, various models, vProcess model, waterfall model, agile way of development, now the current way of the DevOps, DevSecOps, everything briefly covered here. And the entire software development environment ecosystem. What do you mean by library? What do you mean by set of tools? What do you mean by configuration management? What do you mean by the continuous integration and continuous delivery? All those are covered. So secure coding, what are the security coding standards that you can check with the static analysis? What could be the potential vulnerabilities that you can check with the dynamic analysis, dynamic testing? What are the advantages, disadvantages of developing your own software? What are the problems or potential threats as well as advantages with an acquired software are covered here. So let me go back the recap wise quickly. So we covered about all these 8 domains. Get a mind map of how are you linking 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and what you are focusing, what the examiners or the test prepare guys really expected or expect us to really get certified, that you need to be clear. Under what criteria you can really complete with the thumping colors with for by not writing, even attempting 126th question. What precautions you need to take, that was clearly covered for each domain in this. Okay, so with this I want to conclude this session. Please go through this once or twice. If this particular lesson 6 is clearly understood, you are pretty much done. You are clearing your exam by not getting or not seeing the 126th question. That I can promise. That's what I did. This practically how I prepared and how I could comfortably clear. That time the minimum questions were only 100, exactly 100 questions in 1 hour 25 minutes. How I could clear that practical learning and wisdom and enough precautions that I took for my exam, that I put across here as set of detailed mind maps. Please feel free to visit Unical Academy, participate actively on the forums, blogs, practice tests. You can also leave your comments on this channel too, so that we can respond and we can be more interactive with our Q&A. Okay, thank you. Have a good day.